Up, everybody. Trying to get down and all this other good stuff taken care of. Well, I was trying to find a good spot where the lighting's going to be okay. So I need some help with everybody who is actually here. If you can actually let me know, sounds good, not good. It's probably not good. I mean, I've been working on this for weeks and literally trying to get everything in place, including the fact that I had already had to buy a new laptop for the job, but now I definitely had to do this. But I want to go ahead and start off with a word of prayer. It's definitely how I always want to start everything. So, if everybody don't mind, Father, just asking that you would take the opportunity to come in and just take over. And Lord, that those who are interested in what you have planned for all of us, just asking that you would just show yourself strong and mighty in these next several minutes as I begin to share what you share with me and bring a collaboration of youth workers, youth leaders, presenters, presentations, talents, resources, everything. Asking this in your name, Jesus. Amen. So, welcome to the Google Hangout for Immersion. So, I'm still going to be doing some testing stuff at this time right now. And so, I definitely want people, if you actually got in and you can type in feedback or whatever, I definitely want you to do that. I am going to be doing some screen sharing stuff off and on. May not be as much at this time. So I definitely just want people to give some input on it. I'm going to be also checking my own, stuff because I want to make sure sound wise everything is not going crazy and stuff. So I definitely need people to give some feedback and say, hey, the sound is good. The audio is good. It's horrible. It's whatever. As well as anything that needs to be changed up. So, to my the thing as to why I'm doing this, I want to be able to explain several things. We always want to provide a structure here, and definitely we want to be able to get people interested. As God allows us to grow and change, we won't go from this basic format or Google Hangouts, we'll be able to also do an official real live stream from not only the Google Hangouts to the Facebook. That's what I've been working on, and it wasn't working out so well. In fact, I ended up adding on another program that everybody was saying you got to do that to make it work, and it wasn't doing its thing. So, but it's going to work out. Every time, most of the time you do stuff like this is some of the things that happen. You just got to work through the kinks and stuff. Plus, as y'all probably saw on the live I did today, I am operating on fumes. I have been trying to work on multiple things personally with the job and everything else, playing catch up. It's been tough, but we definitely want to be able to connect with people, want to be able to share my story as to why I'm at where I am now doing immersion. So I'm adjusting the camera here just a tad bit. Why I'm doing immersion, why I feel this is very important at this time right now, why it's very important to link up and connect with people. So like I said, I'm actually monitoring myself, and I'm probably going to end up putting in some earphones to hear myself, which of course naturally they would be up. So, well, no, I got them over here. So you may see me pop some in so I can just kind of hear what I'm actually saying, and hear it as I'm watching. I'm really watching myself being broadcast from my phone. So I make sure like whatever, you guys are seeing is probably what I'm seeing is probably what you guys are seeing. So I'm going to go back and forth for a second to see if anyone is connecting. There may not be anyone that's connecting, but as we grow along and we get better with stuff, we're hoping that people will join in. Because I also realize that if you're like me, just like I said, life is moving forward and proceeding forward. But I want to be able again to share the story as to why we're doing this, why it's important, what are some things that we're definitely going to be working on and proceeding forth with and going from there. So after this, try to take a quick nap, jump back on everything I was doing, and hopefully just kind of check on things later to see how people, what people thought, what they want to provide feedback. And I definitely need as much feedback as possible, including stuff like lighting. I know like we got a lot of soft light in our house because, we just kind of like soft light. And so I know I watched some of the videos earlier and it was kind of dark, but it's kind of, when you work and you're going and going and going all day long, you get home, you want to be in a place of rest. So, which is something that we're going to be talking about with immersion, that especially when you're working in ministry, period. So I'm looking at a little glare right here. So I'm going to make some adjustments real quick. I'm going to go pick those earphones up and we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit. So like I said, I'm actually going to put on some headphones because I want to hear what is going on, because whatever you guys are hearing, whatever I'm hearing first, I'm almost certain you guys are hearing, or if it's something different, hopefully some people will tell me what's happening. So that way I'll know how to make adjustments with future stuff. This is something that's going to be kind of going on right now, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe longer than that, depending on how many people jump in, maybe a shorter duration where it's once a week. So okay. All right. So it sounds like it's pretty good. It sounds like everything is going good on the sound. I did try to play some music in the beginning. That wasn't working out so well. And I don't know if it's because of the screen sharing and whatnot. I'm going to check something real quick. Okay. So I want to go ahead and talk about why even put this together, why bring up immersion. So I got to give the short, long story, pretty much how I came into youth and young adult ministry. I definitely know this is a calling. Some of the things I experienced, what I'm experiencing now, and how I know that God is beginning to mold and shape some things. So I pretty much have been interested in youth ministry even ever since high school. And from that time, I was actually wrestling. I was one of those guys where, family grew up in church. There's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of other things that was going on. So leaving out of my hometown going into college, I kind of had a culture shock as I began to see more young people that were really living for God. They were really living out a relationship, and it wasn't the typical approach to Christianity that often many churches have, where they deal with the more of, if you're going to be a Christian, you deal with the don'ts and don't understand the do's. You don't understand the things that you have liberty to do and have the power to do and so forth. So still was able to get in there and do some things with a lot of folks, graduated from college. And that's when God really began to deal with me, because I remember my last year of college, I picked up this book. And many of you might be familiar with it. It's called Hell's Best Kept Secret. And so I'm reading just the first 2 pages of the book, and I literally put the book down. I remember taking that book and burying it under several other books as I was packing, getting ready to go home. So in the process of that, still trying to live out what I thought was being a Christian, or Christianity, what my understanding was, not even realizing even with all of that, God was still molding and shaping me, including preparing me for youth and young adult ministry, because I still didn't have a clear understanding of what that really was. I was more under the impression of what I call graham cracker Jesus, which is basically, make some food, bring everybody to a room, and then tell them a good story, show some application somehow with it, and then everybody goes home. And make sure you don't have sex, make sure you don't cuss people out, make sure you obey your parents and all those things. So that was going on for a while until I hit what I call the summer of '98. And that's when I ended up, what I thought, giving up Christianity. I was like, I'm done with it. I'm through. And it's such a long story as to why I ended up doing it. I still remember, my mother driving up, and I ended up getting out of my car because I lived in Atlanta at that time and came down for a visit. And I took all of my gospel music, Bible, everything I had, I gave it to her, said, I'm done. You can have it. I'm through. And I walked away from the car and didn't look back. And I knew she was hurt. She was confused, like, what in the world's going on? And so I remember a slew of people calling me. It was like, what's happening? And I was like, look, I'm done. I don't believe in it. But I can also tell that someone was pursuing me in the process. Someone was pursuing me. And so what I ended up doing that whole summer was literally going through some major stuff that entire summer. A lot of losses and everything. In the process of that, even without all those losses and things began to kind of calm down, I still was just kind of lost as to the whole concept of Christianity, of kingdom living and so forth. And I remember cleaning up one day and going through the box that I never really opened since college, because I took that box and just moved it. It was my stuff. And I remember going through it and pulling out some old things and found out, there was a Bible still in there. And then I ended up pulling up that book again, Hell's Best Kept Secret. And so I started reading this book, and I said, I didn't have anything else to do. And I was sitting there going, why did I get rid of this book? And so I'm sitting here reading this book, and I got so intrigued in it, I didn't put it down for like 3-4 days. And going into the Bible, going back to the book, and then eventually just staying so much with the Bible, and started saying, wait a minute, if I wish this stuff would have been taught to me as a young person, I guarantee I would have most likely avoided so many poor choices at that time. And so I was like, well, if I'm feeling this way, then how are these young people feeling this way? How are there young people out there that feel like this? Are there actually people that are in youth and I didn't even really understand young adult ministry, because I was still thinking like, okay, once you graduate high school, then, you go into the adults and that's it. And didn't understand the whole gamut of, guess what? It's still kind of this gap in between. Yes, you're an adult, but you're not sitting in like, let's be honest. Often we sit in a lot of main church Bible studies where your older individuals have retired. They're getting ready to retire. They've been out there working for years. They've got houses. And here you are, you're just getting out of college trying to figure out, where am I going to find an apartment? So that's a whole nother thing that we will be dealing with as well. But at this point now, I started really praying, got into, really evangelize, because I just felt there was such a need to preach this gospel this very thing that I didn't really understand. But I remember God literally just freezing me for like a 2-year period. And I would go out and still, preach the gospel, but at the same time, as far as like, preaching, ministering, working with a youth organization, it's like I wasn't doing anything for like almost a 2-year period. And so I remember finally connecting with this church in Atlanta, Martin Street Church of God. And at that time, he's senior pastor now in Kansas City. But at the time, he was youth pastor, Dennis Lester Jr. He's now senior pastor, Dennis Lester Jr. And eventually we'll try to get him here so he could tell his story of transitions and how it's very important. There's a lot of important things, but I started working there, and that's when God really started molding who I was, molding me as far as understanding relationships, understanding a lot of things that I need to change about myself, but understanding youth ministry as a whole, because I started really reaching out and saying, hey, there's got to be more to this than just bringing everybody to a Bible study or having just a convention once a year. And then all of a sudden there's all this stuff in between. So as I started really praying and really seeking God about what this is, then the Spirit began to direct me to connections with a lot of people. And I started really reading a lot of material. And even when I went to seminary, took multiple classes dealing with youth and young adult ministry. And I think that's what triggered my whole thought process of something's missing. Even with all the basic messages that comes with the gospel, that comes with the kingdom, that comes with evangelism, that comes with relationships as far as, child to parent, parent to child, and so forth. I said, there's still something missing out of this. And so several events occurred where I ended up becoming the youth pastor at a church called Total Renewal Church of God. At that time, it was being shepherded by senior pastor Jeff Robinson at that time. And so here I was now youth pastor, and I was there for 7 years. And so at the end of the 7-year period, all of a sudden some major changes occurred. At this point now, I'm beginning to see God begin to say, okay, I've shown you some surface stuff. Now we're going to get into some deep stuff that's been what I would say latent within myself for years. And now we're going to have to break this stuff up because there's some things that are coming down the pipe. You're going to have to be, transformed in a way that you haven't been transformed before. So that time I went through some major losses. I mean, some really big losses, from losing the job, from actually one day getting an email, and at that time the pastor saying, hey, I am, resigning from the church. And within a matter of a couple of months, I went from being the youth pastor and the senior pastor to us writing a letter saying we're leaving the church. And, without going into full details of that, it was a lot of things going on in that transition that became so unhealthy. And then there was some personal things, some family things that was going on that it got to a point where I understand people that talked about wilderness experiences. I was in a wilderness experience, and I believe that we're coming out. I believe we're kind of really on the edge and looking back, but we're now seeing a clearing. But I went through some wilderness experience, a lot of losses, a lot of pain, feeling it mentally, physically, everything else. So at that point, it was like I literally was, what, God, what's going on? Why? Jesus, why? Why all of this? But I had to be honest with myself and say, I know part of the reason why, a lot of decisions that I made. And so in the process of that, there was a lot of things I had to let go and say, no, I'm not doing this anymore, and be done with it. And in that, I began to honestly hear the voice of God, begin to really see the evidence of him all around me and everything that was going on, to see times when I was ignoring him, to go back and think about those things, and see his spirit, see him, see Christ working in my life for their glory, for their transformation. In the process of that also, I started connecting with a lot of other youth pastors and youth leaders. And so this is where I began to understand the importance of the gospel itself, the power of God, the kingdom of God, understanding the importance of relationships within my own family, because at that time I had a child. My wife had a child, and it was like mind blowing for me that your whole life just changes. Everything changes. Sleep, work, everything changes. So it was like, what are you gonna do? Because at this time, in all honesty, I hadn't gone to a church because of pain and other stuff for a while, and a lot of it was involving, and this is something we'll talk about too, is often when leadership, when individuals go through pain, who reaches out for them, who gives them the support. And there were several individuals that were giving support, but what I had to understand is that that's great that you receive support from people, but at the same time, you have to really reach out to God and trust Him and all of that. And so my mind, the way that it thinks is, hey, if I'm an adult now, I'm going on, I think now at that point, 44 years old. Now I'm 45, and I say, man, I'm going through this and trying to figure out things. I can only imagine how young people are feeling. How I can only imagine how young adults are feeling. I can imagine the parents of those youth and young adults, how they're feeling when certain things are going on, when life just kind of comes crashing down around you. And so I really had to ask for forgiveness for God for everything in my life, from poor decisions, how I treated people. And so at that point, He began to open certain doors, and I began to really understand about carrying His cross. In the process of that, the question came up to me one day. Somebody was like, well, would you ever be a youth pastor again? And I, I'm like, hey, if God calls me to it, Christ calls me to it, yeah. But in quiet time, I specifically heard God just telling me, by His Spirit saying, your thing's going to be training people. And I got to show you some stuff. I got to show you some stuff that is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. Some of it's going to be almost nightmare-like. You're not going to believe some of the things that you're going to see. Stuff's been going on for decades, but now you're going to take the plunge and see for yourself. So I remember going into stores and actually seeing stuff about apologetics. And so I never really understood it. I understood like people would stand up for the faith, but I didn't really understand what standing up for the faith for. My thing was, I'm a Christian and I'm not going to be knocked down and nobody's going to turn my head. That's what my whole thought process was. But when I started getting into apologetics and understanding that there were individuals out there who not only didn't believe in the existence of God, or they had God in the form of something else. In Romans, the first chapter talks about that in those days that man will take an incorruptible, holy God and put him into a position of being corruptible like men and like beasts and flying fowl and so forth. And I began to see that. And so what I started doing is I started researching. I started hearing names like the Ray Hagans. I started hearing of groups and individuals involved in stuff like Sinetta TV. I started hearing groups like the Black Hebrew Israelites and the Nation of Islam. And then I started seeing getting clear understanding of the origins of stuff like Jehovah's Witness and the origin of stuff like Mormonism and stuff. And I'm sitting here going like, whoa, wait a minute. And all of a sudden, I remember during a quiet time that the Spirit took me back to a situation when I was working at a psychiatric hospital. I was talking to a young lady. And at that time, I was the chaplain there. And so I remember her coming to me and saying, hey, there was something that you did one night, because I took them to an event when I was still a youth worker there at Martin Street. And she said, I came so close to accepting Christ. She said, but I thought about what I would have to go through with my family. And I thought about all the confusion as far as what I had been taught all my life. And I just couldn't do it. So I'm sitting there going, well, man, what's the thing that really caused that to happen? And so I'm thinking about just one person. What about thousands? What about many of it? And what the Spirit really dealt with me at that point was, you got to realize that in your community, you think that, and often people say that the church is a part of the African-American community, it's part of many minority communities, but at the same time, you got to realize there's things going on in the church now. They're not prepared for what's been germinating and what's coming. And so with the ability for people to just click on Google, type stuff up, look it up, you're now starting to see this explosion of what has been termed the Black cult mystery religions, and you start to hear about individuals like the Jamal Miltons and the Kevin Wesleys. And I remember, and I was privy to a meeting that they had online. 8 of these top leaders of a lot of these belief systems of Comedics and Black Hebrew Israel, and, not really the Black Hebrew Israelites, but there was some that had some background in that. But they all came together. Nation Islam, Black Atheists. These guys came together, and one of the things that was clearly said was, we got to do whatever it takes to get these people out of the church, to stop Christianity. And the best way to do it, and this is what they said verbatim, we got to go after the young people. And that was said multiple times over a 2-month period. And I found myself going, wait a minute, they're blatantly saying they're going after young people. They're blatantly saying they're going to do this. And I'm like, who's out there? Who's making moves? Who's trying to make change? Who's trying to do it? And so as I'm talking to people and everything else, I came to a conclusion. It's not a lot of people out there that are really understanding youth ministry and young adult ministry for what it needs to be. There's not a lot of people out there that can connect with others. And I mean, sometimes youth ministries and young adult ministries get so, for lack of a better term, crazy and territorial. I remember being a youth pastor, and I was actually trying to connect with all the churches because I had the mindset of, man, we got to connect together. We're in a community. There's so many churches here. Why can't we just connect together and work in the community? And I remember going to a particular church in a particular community and walked in and was like, hey, I want to talk to you youth pastors, youth leaders, just introduce myself. And I remember the person going out and then coming back, and the response I got was, what do you really want? And it's like, I just want to introduce myself or whatever. And so then they was like, well, they're busy. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm walking out, and I remember this 2 people, was like, one definitely was doing, but it was 2 that was following me, and they followed me all to the exit. And there was another guy that kind of came, and he's kind of looking at it. And when I walked out, he was like, man, you all right? I said, yeah, I'm good. And he said, well, they were watching you and they were making sure that you got out of church. I'm like, what do you mean? Why? And he said, because they were very afraid that you were coming to take their young people. And I was blown away by that. And I was like, have we gotten to this point? Have we got to this mindset? And so sitting there after a while, still dealing with a lot of other personal things and everything else, understanding, I was like, God, I want life to change, but I also, have this passion. This is what I love to do. And I remember God specifically saying, your thing now is just to train and provide a platform for individuals like yourself to be able to get out there and do the work. Because if you research, you can go online, you can talk. Most of the time in predominantly African-American churches, in the Black church, youth and young adult ministries are confined. They're confined to like the church, or they're confined to a denomination. And someone can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but it's rare that you find people cross over, like they leave from their church and they connect with others in the community or whatnot, unless it's an event, unless there's something like a convention, something back to school type deal. But what you will find, unless it's a very strong ministry with a lot of supports, you will have a big event occur, and then all of a sudden it's quiet and it's dead. Then all of a sudden you got a big event and it flatlines. So what I'm trying to do is literally offer myself knowledge and everything else, and to be able to help others as far as their ministries growing, providing training, providing other things that's needed. I'm asking for prayer to set the balance, because I don't want to go back to where I was before, because one of the things I would tell people, and eventually we'll talk about setting balance when you're dealing with ministry like this, because often it happens, and I hear it from senior pastors, but it can get super bad when you're a youth pastor and you find yourself, there's a lot of things you need to do, but you often will get pulled. Got to be able to set the balance with yourself within your home, because the Bible clearly says that if you can't take care of your home, how are you going to be able to take care of a ministry? And you got to understand that God's put you in that place because there is the trust of you to be able to set the balance and trust him in doing that. but often we trust in our own strength and power to do it, and we get in trouble for that. And I'm admitting that I'm one of those individuals that became the case. So the reason for immersion is to provide, again, a platform for youth and young adult ministers and workers, pastors that are in our predominantly African American churches, Black churches, to provide that training, to provide knowledge and wisdom, to give opportunities for others out there that have so much wisdom. They've got background, they've got materials, they got resources that can be shared so that God's will is done. That's ultimately the first thing. It's not a matter of, hey, let's grow more churches or whatnot. That's not the case. This is not even it's a ministry, but it's not a ministry as far as like most people, they think, oh, he's starting another church. No, I'm not starting another church. And for everybody who might be watching this who says, okay, does he already have a 503c? No, I don't. And you can look online, it's not there. But I'm literally giving this out. I'm gonna tell you, another reason that I'm doing this is how many times I've been to trainings in the past, and you look at the cost of that type of stuff, and I've seen trainings go up as high as $800 something a person for like a 2-3 day. And it's like, okay, it's great knowledge, but when you start asking about specifics, you start asking, for example, well, I don't have a lot of knowledge in working with a young person who may be dealing with suicide because they live in a low income family. How do we provide sources? How do we reach the gospel for them as compared to someone who's living in a very affluent neighborhood? And then how do we bring those youth together? Because how many times I've heard out of my own ears and flipped out when I heard people say, oh, that's the neighborhood kids. What? So I get it. There's a difference in environment and stuff, but these same groups of kids, these same young adults, they need the gospel just like us, and God can do many things in their lives just like He do it in yours. But I've seen literally youth ministry split, where you got the neighborhood kids sit right here, and then the affluent kids sit right, and it's like there's no bringing together. The Bible even talks about, yes, we have our uniqueness, we understand that, but it says that when God sees us, when Christ sees us, there's no Jew, no Greek, there's no male or female. Christ is all in all. And we need to learn how to understand each other's differences. And that's another reason why I bring in immersion too. I know of a lot of people that often they'll pick up materials, they'll look at things and say, hey, this is great about teaching the truths of the Bible, about doctrine and so forth, but what about our own history? What about us? How do we make a contribution? If you're 45 years old like myself or older or anything else, you know, as you were growing up, that often you, unless you were in a specific denomination like AME, CME, and so forth, Baptist in certain areas, that you're not going to get a lot of history or understanding about how Africa was a major contributor when it comes to Christianity before it even went into Europe, and how it's not a matter of, hey, this race or that race or whatever, to understand that those things are God's creation, but we're all brought together. And how does that work? How do we respect each other's contributions? How do we respect each other's place in the kingdom? And so a lot of young people, one of the things we're going to be diving into first is the whole issue of identity and how that's a major problem. That's a major problem when it comes down to the church, because often what happens is that they come in, transform, and renew, but then it's like that's all they know. And so they don't understand identity. They don't understand God creating them a unique, as a unique individual, contributing to the body of Christ. And so it becomes a problem, especially when they feel like they failed because maybe they've sinned in some form or fashion, or they don't get a clear understanding of things. And they're like, this is too much for me. And so you don't have anybody that is sitting down and really understands how to provide discipleship for a lot of our young people. So also connecting people with a lot of people out there right now that's doing major work in the African-American community, in our churches and so forth, the Adam Colemans to the Dr. Eric Masons, Lisa Fields. There's a lot of individuals out there doing some major things that, you know, introducing those people. And the reason why I'm bringing up names like that, because there's also other people that I've met that I know has a wealth of knowledge and can be able to provide so much for us to learn from. And so you're getting what I would say $10,000 worth of knowledge that may come to you free or or maybe there's something we put together that's just so cost friendly that you're like, man, if I would have got this information from somewhere else, we would have been having to do fundraisers for half the year just to get there. But we went there and we got a wealth of that stuff. So there's other things that, like I said, I also want to provide resources. Like sometimes it's a matter of reading material, old books. Like I've got Helping the Struggling Adolescent, which is a book that I use with counseling, and there's biblical counseling as well as guidance with how to work with, young people out there. Like I said, with identity and learning our contribution and learning how we actually were major contributors when it comes to Christianity during antiquity, before it even reached Europe, how many of us, Northern African individuals from Tertullian to Augustine of Hippo, books like this, How Africa Shaped the Christian Mind. A lot of people don't even know a lot about history. And when it comes down to, yes, we were brought over in slavery through the transatlantic slave trade, but a lot of people don't even realize some of the major contributions that we did when it comes to the kingdom of God here during slavery, before slavery, during slavery, after slavery. We're still doing it now. Being able to do that. When it comes down to how do you help young people study the Bible, this is, of course, the main source. And you're hearing so many people now that often even when I'm dealing with evangelism and apologetics, the first thing that they say is, well, if you're going to come to the Bible, you know that stuff is so this and it's so that. We're not going to go to that. And like I had a conversation with someone earlier today, I'm like, if you're going to extract the Bible, it's like telling a scientist, get rid of your studying tools, get rid of your previous research, and just figure it out from that point. It's not how it works. So we want to be able to provide opportunities like that. So I want to be able to connect people with, for example, they may not be watching now, they may watch later, but from Kara and her husband, Nico, they've got a big company called Imperial Sound that, people may not have any understanding of how to really utilize soundboards and stuff in churches. Connecting with, and let me say this is not just for, this is not just for us as Christian Blacks. We're talking about Christians, period. Whether you whites, Indian, indigenous, Korean, it doesn't matter. We got to be able to understand who we are as kingdom people, but also understand each other's uniqueness and contributions. And those things are important. But we want people to realize that often when you hear Christianity and you think Black and Christianity, the first thing, especially nowadays, that everybody jumps to is, oh, we got introduced to Christianity through slavery. And that's not the case. It's not the case. We were doing stuff for centuries before the transatlantic slave trade came to pass. From Ethiopia being the first Gentile nation as a Christian nation to how it reached the Congo before even slave trade, before Catholicism, before colonialism came into play. But there's so many things that we want to be able to bring here with this. So a couple of things that I want to definitely do is, like I said, break down approaches pertaining to, and I'm getting ready to jump real quick to, I'm going to jump off of here. I just want to check and see what I got going on. So right now, it looks like there's only 2 people, and I appreciate, those individuals that are on here right now. Maybe some other folks will jump on later on and just watch this. Like I said, we're still working on how to do the simultaneous feed. And I actually did it once. That was on the old computer before it died. But I'm going to try to work on this. And maybe that's why I said it may be 2 weeks before we do the next one. But I definitely want to just give an introduction to this. Some of the things that I would definitely like to work on in the future is, as God blesses this, we move forward to be able to meet people face to face. Definitely. That's very important, especially connecting with other youth pastors and youth leaders, connecting with them to do some major work, to also come in and maybe eventually do those types of conferences where you're training youth pastors and youth leaders, training entire groups. One of the things that I definitely would like to do is, maybe there are church organizations out there that they're saying, hey, we we want to have an effective youth ministry. It's just we need someone that can come in and definitely do training. And I actually did that before with at the church I used to go to at March Street. When they had their new leadership come up, I joined in with an individual. Y'all going to hear him later on. His name is Pastor Keon Sutton. Y'all probably watched a lot of his videos and heard him before. But we actually went out and did presentation and also did an evaluation. We want to be able to do that in the future where we help people to help change and transform, provide conferences, do other things. I'm a licensed professional counselor. Another thing that we're going to be definitely working on when we're talking about counseling, mental health, behavior health, we are seeing some very heart-wrenching things when it comes to young people. And this is stuff that has been going on for a while, but now we've got resources of people that are trained to deal with these things, and yet we still see some struggles. From introducing people who are counselors, social workers in the field, who are life coaches in the field, to organizations. The organization I work with, the CEO is a very strong Christian, Tawanda Darden, who has empowering youth for positive change. There's some other organizations out there that work specifically with young people. You know, how schools connect. Remember back in the day, we were growing up, there used to be Christian organizations. Then Freedom from Religion and other organizations came in, had a lot of court cases, started removing those things. There are some things that people believe. For example, September 26th, see you at the poll, the National Prayer Day for students at the school. A lot of people believe that teachers, for example, cannot be a part of prayer at the school, or there's no prayer at the school. That's not true. It's never been true. What it says is that a teacher or a school staff can't lead a prayer, but the student can lead the prayer. And there have been some cases recently in which there have been some overturning of certain aspects of what was tried to be done to dumb down prayer in schools. And I believe right now more people than ever are saying, look at all the school shootings that have occurred. We're seeing that frequency picking up by the numbers in the last 5-year period. That a lot of folks now are saying, hey, we need to bring prayer back. We need to bring these organizations back because we don't remember this many shootings occurring. We don't remember these things happening like this. We don't remember this stuff happening. And I don't think that we're going to see this stuff die down or calm down before. So I don't think we're going to see that happen. So what I'm saying is that we learn how to connect with people and we learn how to bring those resources together. So for something like this to work, it's going to take connections. Hopefully I'll be able to build relationship with others that will join in to build on this. And I told the story before. I remember when I first started youth pastoring at Total Renewal, I remember for a month and a half, only 2 people showed up to the Bible studies. And what my goal was, build relationships. That's all I want to do is build relationships, go out in the neighborhoods, canvassing the neighborhoods, evangelizing, introducing myself. And I remember one Wednesday when 2 other, it ended up being 4, and those 3 went out and started telling other people about it. And that's when I told people, I said, one of the things about youth ministry and about young adult ministry is sheep beget sheep. That's always going to be the case. So we're going to also talk about how do you help your young people to connect and reach out to others, because that's going to be your strongest point as far as building up on your ministries in your churches. So the biggest thing that's going to be very important is to be able to connect with individuals as we have this to grow, to also look at some things that we're going to be presenting materials out there. There are books out there. There are great resources, trainings that are out there. I got a ton of that stuff right now. I was going through in the garage and I was looking for something else, and I built a little fort where I couldn't get to it before this presentation. So that's why I got to always be prepared. Have your stuff ready. And I thought it was upstairs, so I have to apologize for that part. But like I said, there's a lot of materials that I have here, and there's going to be some other things that I'll be presenting. If you've got, so I want to go ahead and start wrapping things up. Definitely, if you have um, a calling for the ministry. Oh, this is another thing. Um, and in your predominantly African American churches and your churches that are urban, rural, no matter what, we'll talk about the hardships of being a youth pastor. That often it's a voluntary deal. You are in a bivocational ministry. About 98% of the time, most youth pastors are pastoring at the church, going to college, or they're working, going to college and pastoring at the church, or you're a youth worker that's working under a youth pastor and everybody's going to college or going to church or working or whatever the case may be. And sometimes we look and we see certain churches where your youth pastor and youth leaders literally are getting paid and they're able to take care of it. I know of some youth pastors where their house is being paid for. And they have the ability, they get paid and the house is being taken care of. And so they're being taken care of. So this is why it takes prayer. We'll talk about financial stability, which here I am, 45 years old, really getting to learn more about that and the importance behind that. Take care of the family, take care of self. We'll be going into a lot of these things, the importance behind that. We will jump into major issues, school to prison pipeline, which is a big topic that comes up often at my job. It comes up amongst a lot of my colleagues. I'm a trainer, national trainer for assessments of suicide risk and management. Suicide amongst young people. There used to be a myth that, black folks don't kill them. That's not true and never been true. We just didn't see the numbers. We didn't know the numbers. But now we're starting to hear the numbers, and it's shocking a lot of people. Some of the things as far as how people come into the church and they want people to really see them for who they are, but you still got a lot of that whole tradition, everything else that goes on, as well as how tradition is not always an issue. Tradition is just tradition. Whereas being careful that you hear a lot of people say, well, you could be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good, but being very careful that you're not so earthly grounded that you don't make it into heaven. So we've got to look into a lot of those things. So what I would say to people, what I'm saying to people, first and foremost, if you have a connection, have a desire to really work with youth and young people, if you have a lot of knowledge and wisdom as far as you want to train people, if you have materials, books, if you're someone, for example, that may say, hey, man, I know how to put a convention together, make it work. If there's specific topics that you have a lot of knowledge on, if you're someone working in a specific field or you're in a specific business or you're like a community organizer or a community advocate, we'll bring everybody into this. And we're providing this for people because I definitely want to do this because you hear too often that the church is not doing anything. We know that's a lie. We know that's a lie. It's been a lie for decades, centuries. Church has always been involved. A lot of people get church history confused. Their timelines get skewed. We'll also do a training on getting people to recognize stuff from the Black cult mystery religions, recognize some of the names that are out there. How many times I've had adults come in and say, hey, in the beginning, they're like, I ain't into all that other stuff. I don't worry about that stuff. All I know is, Jesus is my savior. And that's very true. But then when your kid comes back from college and starts telling you about, hey, we Black people in America are the original Jews, and you start going, where did that come from? Or how do I deal with this? And you don't know, and you don't realize this is from the Black Hebrew Israelites. Now we've got an issue. And I've ran into that multiple times in the last 2-year period. And that's what really got me into understanding apologetics, but also how do you teach this? How do you approach this when it comes to youth and young adults? How do you approach this to parents, as well as how do you get churches to understand that this is coming in to a point where now a lot of these groups, a lot of these individuals are being assigned to churches to go in and invade them. There was a guy that I talked to, and I hear people say, man, you like to drop names a lot. A lot of times you got to know who these names are so people will know, okay, if he give this name out, this is what's going on with that. had a video that came out from this guy named Callie Williams. And so he removed the video in the last 3 months, and right now he's blocked some things. But he did a video with this woman, and he specifically said he said the older people, we can't do nothing with them. They done. He said, but we need to go after these young people. We need to get them out of these churches. We need to go after these youth pastors. And he said it specifically. And so this is the stuff that you got to be prepared for. The Bible talks about this stuff. So if we're not equipped to deal with those things, and to understand too, there's a lot of lost people that are the Sauls in these organizations that once the gospel has been told in its truth, in its fullness, with word and power, they go from Saul to Paul to who they really are, which goes back again to the old thing we was talking about with identity. So it's so much that we want to be able to do. I don't want to just throw a whole bunch of things out there because that becomes very confusing, especially if you got young people that really, you have young people that actually say, man, I really want to deal with youth pastor. I want to deal with youth ministry. And how do you build a team? How do you connect with people? How do you look at the vision of the pastor that's been given by God? And how do you work your youth ministry, your young adult ministry under that? How do you make that happen? So how do we reach out to the community? How do we get out to the community and we show ourselves as not a harm to the community, but a help to the community, and eventually become a heart of the community? Let's be honest, there's a lot of church organizations out there that are doing more harm than good. The big topic that's come up recently was, of course, the Aretha Franklin funeral. And I remember seeing so many entries where people was like, the Black church took an L the past couple of days when that was going on, including the whole thing that happened with the singer Ariana Grande. And I think it's Bishop Charles Ellis. I think it's Bishop Charles Ellis III, and the whole groping situation and how that's viewed, and how that causes the church to be viewed, even as he, apologized or whatnot, how that, still contributes, and how do we deal with that where we're not adding on to the whole thing of, see, I told you that the church is no good, that we understand forgiveness, restoration, we understand moving forward, but we also understand accountability. And not only that's it, I bring that up because you got to understand there's a lot of things that happen in youth ministries. And there have been countless stories out there of guys that come in as youth pastors, youth ministers, whatever, chaperones, that have molested kids, that have raped kids, that have had these horrible relationships out there. And how do you deal with that? We're going to even tell you how to do background checks. When your people are coming in and saying, I want to be a volunteer, I want to be a youth pastor, how do you do the background check to check them? Because I've done that before and came up with somebody that I was like, no way would I even allow them to work in youth ministry because of the things that popped up in the background that wouldn't have been known if nobody would have actually take the time to say, hey, let's check this person out. I understand a lot of times when you're in churches that when somebody comes and says, yeah, I'll be over the children's church, or I'll be working with the youth or whatever, because you don't have a lot of folks that want to do it. There's not a calling, and yet you have these youth that ask, well, what can we do? What activities are we going to do? We don't want to always be taken to the park or Six Flags once a year. We want something for us. And so the church usually reaches out to the first person that's willing to grab the baton. And this doesn't happen all the time, but a lot of times you have people that come in with some really bad intentions. And that's why it's important this is why the Bible says, test the spirit. Test the spirit, check them out. So we'll be dealing with those subjects as well. So I'm asking people to, first of all, in the next couple of weeks, definitely pray for me, pray with me, fast for me, fast with me, that if this is definitely God's will, that he will move it forward. Not only just with this, but in my personal life, I've got so many things that I need to get caught up on, get straightened out. Ministries are not effective if you can't control your home. Ministries are not effective. God's will is not effective if you can't control things for yourself, whether that's spiritually, mentally, health. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about those three aspects, why those things are important. If you're bivocational as myself, sometimes I feel like I'm triple vocational. being able to set balance between your job, because sometimes if you're not careful, one will lapse over the other. Dealing with depression. That was one thing that I left out. I was dealing with depression. And a lot of times when people hear that, they go, "Oh, if you're dealing with depression, then you shouldn't be in youth ministry, youth pastor." I'm like, you need to read through the Bible how many leaders were often in a place of depression, and it took God bringing them out. It took Christ bringing them out, and that's what He's done for me. And what I would tell people is, often when you're like that, usually two things occur. That's because you have a hard time going to people and talking to them about it, but most of all, approaching God. The scripture says, "Come boldly to His throne." And often we feel like we've let down and we failed so miserably that we don't think we can get out. So it's important to be able to say, no, that's not the case. You can get out. And sometimes that means admitting, you know what, I can't do this. I can't figure certain things out, and I need help. And I had to do that a lot, and still doing it at this point now. Even as I shut this off, to be able to sit down, take a sleep, and then get up and go back to doing work, trying to catch up. Because what you want to be able to do is, again, allow Christ to set the balance when you're doing these types of things. And so here I am, just providing training for folks, providing resources, opportunities for people. And yet at the same time, I want to be able to help people to understand, set that balance. It is important that your walk with Christ is first and foremost. That's going to help you to move forward and set the balance, because without that, all of this other stuff means nothing. Other issues that we'll deal with, and one of those things that are very close to my heart, is the importance of understanding you as a youth pastor, as a youth leader, as a young adult pastor, young adult leader. You are just a resource. You are not the source. And sometimes you may fall in that category for a temporary period, but you are not the source of where our young people and young adults need to receive. They have family. Their parents are the first and the real youth pastors in this. And if you don't support the parents, if you don't help them as providing discipleship, teaching them the admonition of the Lord and their citizenship in His kingdom, then your youth ministry, your young adult ministry will flatline. And I usually give it an average of 6 months to 7 months before it just flatlines, before it just proves itself ineffective. Because how many times I've gone into conventions or I've gone into events, and the first thing I hear is, "All right, y'all parents, y'all can leave because this is for the young people, not for you." That's not how that works. How many ministries are out there right now that the average age in that ministry, the oldest person is about 30, 32 years old, because they keep saying, "Hey, we don't want to deal with the old stuff, the old songs and everything else. We want to leave that out." And now those ministries are struggling. They're hanging on by a thread because there is no building around the community. These guys now have to do reality shows and all kinds of stuff to try to maintain, or they have to put out an album every 2 months now to maintain. But it's starting to flatline. And it's simply because God's not going to be in anything like that. We often hear people talk about the Joshua generation, but they keep forgetting Joshua and Caleb and the other leaders were around late 40s, 50 years old before they started coming out of the wilderness. They were still a connection with everybody as a whole. So those things are very important as well. So been on here for an hour. I'm glad that some people came on. I hope that, everyone is praying as we start to move forward. I will begin to gather things, setting, the first training we'll do is basically basic youth and young adult ministry one-on-one, what it really is, the history behind that, especially for us in the Black church, how we reached out to communities, how we can be more effective in our communities at this time, and then begin to move forward and build on that. Again, like I've asked, please be prayerful for myself to kind of wrap my story up. Even as I begin to work on this, I really, and I hear people say this a lot of times, but I also agree with them that often when you're in the heat of battle and you're getting close to where God wants you to be at that particular objective, that things get more heavy, they get more dangerous. And I definitely get that part. So I'm in a place right now where that's actually going on, and I would not be surprised that there are some things that happen. Some of these things I'm taking responsibility for and moving forward, but I know there's some things that the enemy wants to set up to say, oh no, we're not going to do this. Because whenever you start talking about the church coming together, any part of it, including youth and young pastors and leaders and workers and teachers and community activists and community organizers, everybody's coming together to do a work for God's kingdom. It's like, oh no, let's shut that down. And I had some incidents that happened this past week that it was getting to a point I was like, man, I'm finna let this go. This is too much. But I had to literally pray and say, you know what? If I was doing this just for me, it's very easy to get on something like this and just be like, all right, y'all, I'm gonna talk about all my accolades and all this other stuff. And most people that get to know me realize that I don't like doing that unless it's just necessary to bring out, which I might need to do right now. What are your credentials? I've heard that happen. That's another thing we'll deal with. One of the things I definitely want to help churches and other people with is to actually credential people who want to be youth and young adult pastors. A lot of denominations, a lot of organizations, they just bring people in and just let them do whatever. And there are some churches, and let's just be honest. I may have some of our Christian Caucasian brothers and others that of other ethnicities that are watching this, and they'll tell you they credential their people. They credential those that are going to be leading and taking care of their kids. And often, a lot of times amongst us, that's not the case. Or we run into the thing of we'll do it, but we're not staying there. Youth ministry and young adult ministry is the stepping stone to where we want to get to. There's many of us that this wasn't our stepping stone. This is our stopping place. This is what God has called us to, and we'll deal with that issue. As far as if people say, hey, what's your credentials? I got licensed as an ordained minister, and I look at this thing again, 2007. Started before that as what they called a minister within the church, and became an ordained minister under Church of God in Anderson, Indiana. Like I said, licensed professional counselor, started at April of 2010. Been doing it 7 years, going on 8 years very soon. Actually, this month, 8 years. Also been working with young people in all kind of capacities, from churches, mental health, behavioral health, psychiatric hospitals. Currently right now on what they call intensive family intervention team, getting ready to start a private practice very soon. They'll be working with this and combining some things. So there's a lot of things there that people say, hey, let's see. Eventually I'll show actual credentials and stuff and whatnot. Like I said, again, I got stuff that's kind of lost, but we definitely want people to understand that this is a trusted source to do things. So, and I get it that I saw something earlier this week where someone was supposedly doing training and stuff, and they actually there's a possibility there's some money issues. And I tell people, man, take care of the stuff in-house before you do anything like that. But we're working on a lot of different things. So what I'm asking again is if people could definitely pray for me, my family, pray for me tonight. Like I said, I'm going to try my best to get this nap and get up and start doing some work. If I can't do it within an hour, I'm just going to go ahead and work. Family's supposed to be back in town. I'm going to try to do some more work before I go back into work. And I know I'm probably going to have to take a personal mental break this week. Because even with that, I'll stop. I got to, it's a lot of things, but I want to be able to make sure everything works. And it takes a lot of work. And I remember some stories I've heard of people that said, man, I remember getting so low that I'm actually, was in the car. And so I look at them and say, man, I pray that I never get to that point. But if God can raise you out of that, he can definitely do it for anyone, including myself. And so even when it comes down to ministry and so forth, I definitely want to be able to help people, reach out to people, and just be able to contribute and helping. So I'm asking that y'all pray for me because there's a lot of things that's got to be done. I know it can be done. It can be knocked out, but I'm just asking that y'all be prayerful. So I'm probably looking at maybe in a 2-week period, I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out how to get the live on, try to take care of some other things. But in the meantime, starting to gather, putting a schedule together, connecting with folks and asking them, hey, what do they want to do, and so forth. Again, this is the beginning of God moving and doing great things for us that are working in this thing called youth and young adult ministry. It's a very hard but rewarding experience. There's a lot of great people that are out there. There's a lot of great resources out there, but if you need someone that's going to help connect it, I'm going to be that person that's going to help connect those things. So I want to go ahead and wrap it up. If you could, I'm going to post this on, like I said, still haven't figured out how to make it work on the live, but if you got feedback, questions, topics you want to talk about, anything in particular, please go ahead and let me know what those are. That's what I'm going to be doing in the next 2-week period, gathering all that information, starting to go ahead and put together the first one. We're talking about youth and young adult leadership 101, the basic stuff. How sometimes it's important to get to the basic stuff before you know how to move on. Putting together, what is the vision of the church? What are some different things you got to look for as far as your team members? What is your real purpose when you're working in specific neighborhoods? What is it that God is saying that the people need, along with the gospel, along with His truth, along with discipleship? What are some other things that's needed in those communities? How do you connect with others in the community? We'll even talk about one of the things that have come up, and a question that's come up from time to time is, well, how can the community work together? And maybe I'm necessarily not a Christian. And I tell people, we do that all the time, whether it's your job, whether it's your school, going to a store. You're always dealing with people that are not of the kingdom, they're not of the faith. And you got to be able to do that of love. But when they come down to working specifically in the communities, there's so many things that are going out there, from lack of education, school brutality, lack of employment, what's going on, so we got to be able to figure out how to do it from God's standpoint and still be able to help people, even if they're not like us. So be prayerful. Got a lot that I'm going to definitely offer. If you're, like I said, if you're someone that wants to be a part of this, has something you want to present or whatnot, please, let's sit down, let's talk, let me check it out. We're doing this for Christ. So I want to end with prayer, and I'm going to shut this show off, and I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. So Father, we thank you for the opportunity again. We ask that you would take this, and hopefully that as I pray for others, they're praying for us, that this is your will. Help me to get some things, the work done this evening, tomorrow, to connect and move forward. Help me to get some sleep, but help others to get rest. Help those that are out there working in the field to continue to do so. We thank you and praise your name, Jesus. Amen. Amen. I will see y'all next time. I see y'all in 2 weeks. Please send me your questions, topics you want to discuss. If you got resources, if you're a person that wants to do a presentation or whatever, it's a Google Hangout. Understand that, we're going to be able to share some, things, movies, presentations, PowerPoints. We're going to be doing all that stuff. So it's Dr. Wells. I'm out.